folks, it's David here. Now, as you'll know, it's International Week, and that means there hasn't been an awful lot of football for us to talk about. Well, certainly not Rangers related, and that would have left us normally without a show today. So what we thought we would do to maybe fill your ears is a little bit of sneaky marketing as well, is provide one of our shows from our Patreon site, the wonderful Time Capsule with Martin Ramsey. Now, what Martin does in his show every week is goes back to a Rangers game from the past and looks at everything around it in great detail, not just what was happening on the pitch, not just the match itself, but also what was happening in the world at the time. Very much, as the title suggests, a snapshot of where we were when a match took place, and we thought there would be nowhere better to go this week after everything that's been going on than to May 1996 and Paul Gascoigne's virtuoso display as Rangers destroyed Aberdeen 3-1 to win 8 in a row. If you like the show, please consider subscribing to Patreon. There are lots and lots of quality items like it. We will be back on Thursday with a preview of the Hamilton match, but I hope you enjoy this. If you do, it's patreon.com/heart and hand, and for $1.99 a month you'll be able to get 48 episodes of this show and plenty more like it. Thanks to our producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and I will talk to you again on Thursday. Till then, take care. Cheers.
Hello there, I'm Martin Ramsey, and welcome to episode 7 of the Time Capsule. This week we are back in 1996 to revisit the first time that the Scottish League title was decided live on TV, and it would be decided, fittingly, by Scotland's Player of the Year. My guest this week, with back-to-back appearances, is the voice of Heart in Hand, Mr. David Edgar. Welcome back, David.
I feel now that I'm settling into the first team on the Time Capsule. I've started to get a bit of a run of games under my belt and just building up that confidence level.
You're into your stride now.
Yes.
What were you up to in the spring of 1996?
A kind of pivotal time for young Edgar, actually, was the spring going into the summer of 1996. I had finished my first year at university, which was at Stirling University, which had ended in a fairly spectacular car crash of my life, the first and sadly not the last, and was currently plotting my escape from it to transfer to Strathclyde Uni for permanently. I was going to say for the following year, but permanently, and move back home. And all that was sort of being arranged, and this was my last couple of weeks at Stirling Uni. And then that summer was one of the best summers I've ever had. It was just fantastic. Euro 96 was on. It was a wonderful time. Started at Strathclyde in the September and met my future wife, my first wife. So 96 was a great year. Started really badly for me, but got better and better and better. And Rangers sort of were a good barometer of that.
Yeah, we'll get on to that in a moment. As always, we like to take a look back at what was happening around the time.
No. You don't get to just hear mine. It's like I've showed you mine. You need to show
me.
What are you up to?
15 and just about to do standard grades, I think, which were generally speaking a breeze. I think Hoggy and I talked about this in the Loudrop Cup final, which is obviously a game that only happened 3 weeks after this one. Just really excited for everything the summer had in store, and the music was good, and life was good, and the Rangers were good. It was a
a great summer,
sunny time, and I would happily go back there and spend 3 months back there.
Yes.
But yeah, we might revisit that later on in the year. At the cinema at this time, Terry Gilliam's 12 Monkeys with Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt was the biggest movie released around that time, along with Woody Allen's Mighty Aphrodite. You could still see Toy Story in certain cinemas, which was released earlier in the year, and an Oliver Stone biopic that I'm sure you've seen umpteen times.
Yes.
Next.
My favourite movie of all time. Yes, I could act in the fucking thing. But what a cast! I mean, brilliant. Spectacular cast. James Woods as Haldeman, that guy who was the bad guy in Good Morning Vietnam that I can't remember his name, as Ehrlichman, the brilliantly cast David Hyde Pierce of Frasier fame as John Dean. He
looks very like him as well, though.
Oh man, it's a great bit of casting. Powers Booth, I fucking love Powers Booth. He is just awesome. He plays Haig, and of course Hopkins with a a decent Nixon. I've seen better, but a good performance. And who was the lady that plays his? I can never remember her name. The sort of, she was in Pleasantville as well.
It's gone from me now.
You know the one I mean, but she's fantastic as Pat Nixon, which isn't I heartily recommend this movie to everyone. It's a fabulous film. Doesn't take too many liberties, especially for an Oliver Stone movie. Maybe
unlike JFK.
Yeah, if you're thinking along those lines, it's not like that. It's actually a reasonably faithful biopic, and he doesn't like Nixon clearly, but it's a reasonably fair portrayal of him. So highly recommend it. Highly recommend that movie.
Alanis Morissette was top of the album charts with Jagged Little Pill.
I fucking hated that. Right. Now, having been, as I say, at uni, it seemed compulsory for every mopey bird at university to have a copy of that fucking album. And I remember actually falling out with a girl, and she just played this record constantly. She said, well, it's so true, men are always fucking women over. And I said, yes, it's because you listen to dreary fucking shite like that, and you deserve it. I hated that record, and it was everywhere.
It was everywhere, and as it was 1996, so was Morning Glory, because it's still in the top 3 by then. In the top 20 singles charts, the Manic Street Preachers are there, number 4 with Design for Life, and Children by Robert Miles was still holding its own.
Wow.
The perfect go-to tune for BBC sports producers when they needed a sound bed upon which to put a kind of goals compilation, rounding up the action from the weekend. It was there pretty much through the rest of the 90s from what I can remember.
It's that is your kind of mid-90s provincial nightclub soundtrack. Would be Children by Robert Miles, Just a Little Bit by Gina G, and The Tamperer. That was, which back then you could name a band the Tamperer and still get played on the BBC, whereas these days
it wasn't literal.
Yeah, a bit too close to home. But that just reminds me of nightclub where everyone would be wearing garishly coloured Ben Sherman shirts. I remember that was the vogue. An awful lot of very loud colours. It wasn't like it was today, and everybody having the kind of Lee Dixon curtains hairdo as well. There were a few fledgling attempts to grow from a few people to go for the full Liam Gallagher sort of Beatle cut, but I think you can only really get away with that if you are in fact a Gallagher.
Yeah, I couldn't. I'm pretty sure of that. George Michael released Fast Love that week, a salute to one night stands, and was rewarded with the number 1 spot for the next 3 weeks. It would be 2 years after this, of course, when one of his later releases would reward him with a £500 fine and 80 hours of community service.
Poor George Michael, he never really got his head round the whole just be gay thing, did he? Just there's no need for all this. Partly the reason that he stayed in the closet so long was that he didn't want to tell his mum. And you look back at the videos, the Wham videos from the 80s, and you think she must have known on some level.
Yeah, you didn't need Columbo in there, I don't think. Looking back at the news at the time, it's hard not to see the pertinence to today. I try not to timestamp these shows, and sadly this probably won't do it either. At the time of recording, the news is filled with America's deadly struggle with gun laws. Whenever you listen to this, be it the afternoon it's released or 6 months or a year from now, that's probably most likely still going to be the case. In April 1996, Britain was dealing with the aftermath of its gun atrocity in Dunblane. And the week that we're talking about here, the leading up to the game, it's when the campaign to ban handguns was starting to gain cross-party parliamentary support. It was really starting to catch fire, and the Daily Record was very much behind it, devoting front pages to that. The day before the game, Australia would go through this same traumatic process when there was a similar mass shooting in Tasmania, and the impact of both countries' responses 20 years on is evident. In 1996, the average salary was just under 14k. It cost you 61p a litre to fill up your car and was £1.72 a pint. Now, David, to the Rangers and the build-up to this match. It's fair to say that this was probably the first time in 5 years that we'd actually been in a title race.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. Celtic had improved dramatically, exponentially that season, because although they'd won the Cup the previous year, they'd never really looked like a side who had the consistency to trouble us. This season, with of course bringing in a number of decent attacking players, that Celtic had a lot more about them. They were a settled side. Burns had them playing good football, and although it's overplayed,
we'll get to that in a moment, because it really is overplayed. It's stuck in my throat.
I was gonna say, although it's overplayed, you would think, listening to kind of some Tim historians, that this was kind of Valencia 2000-2001 in terms of wonderful sides that never got the reward. They weren't. They were a good side. But what they were adept at for the first time in years was knocking off the rest of the Premier League, kind of in the way Aberdeen do now. And again, I don't like to timestamp it, but this will probably be the same, as you said, in a year, while Derek McInnes is there. That Aberdeen, the ability to beat everyone who's not important, that was kind of what Celtic had. But of course, it was a Tommy Burns trait that they just did not. He did not have the emotional capacity, I think, to be able to overcome Rangers when it really mattered. And I think that Walter had a calmness that he didn't have.
They only lost one league game all season. That was the first Old Firm game of the season when we won 2-0. Gascoigne scoring the second, of course Alec Cleland of all people getting the first. We would knock them out of both cups, the quarter-final of the League Cup at Parkhead, McCoist scoring a header at the back post from a very deep Gascoigne cross, and the Scottish Cup semi-final at Hampden, we won 2-1, an absolutely excellent game from memory. After the third Old Firm game of the season, 3rd of January, 0-0, we are 8 points clear, but we've played 2 games more. They get those 2 games in pretty quickly after that, so we go into the weekend of January the 20th, only 2 points ahead and level in games. We lost 3-0 at home to Hearts, an Alan Johnson hat-trick, but they can only draw 0-0 at Rugby Park, so it's cut down to 1. The final Old Firm game, I think, was March the 17th. Again, another draw, 1-1 this time, and we end up 3 points ahead because they drew away to Falkirk, I think the week before or 2 weeks before, 0-0 again. And it's this cavalier football was the term that was used pretty much all through that season. Not sure how widely spread across the media it was used, David, but certainly Radio Clyde, that's all they ever talked about. We scored 10 more goals than they did. We conceded the same. It is one of the myths of the era.
Yes, absolutely. Celtic, there are a lot of good performances from Celtic, but look where they come. They come at Parkhead, and they come against sides you would expect them to beat. And they did. And fair play to them, because they hadn't done for the first half of that decade. So, yes, it's worthy of praise if you're a Celtic fan, but it's not that impressive if you're not. They're doing what you would sort of call par for them at that stage. But because they hadn't for a long time, then I think that people who had a fondness for them attach a greater significance to it. And maybe, having watched guys like Wayne Biggins, Tony Cascarino, Carol Muggleton, etc., even just 2-3 years before, of course that they're going to be thinking this is amazing, this is spectacular, in much the same way as we probably overpraised the Warburton first few months, because the comparison to what we'd been watching was so big. But I wrote about this in my book, which is still available, 21st Century Blue, Being a Bear in the Modern World, called by at least one of the podders on this show the greatest Scottish book since Trainspotting. And it kind of annoys me that this mid-90s Rangers team, which was excellent, is sort of treated like almost 11 big muscular guys trying to kind of deflect the ball towards the opposition net and hoping that it bounces in. We could play some terrific stuff. There were some real doings administered by that Rangers team, and when we were in our groove, as was proven repeatedly, nobody in that league could live with us. And when we weren't in our groove, we could dig it out, and they couldn't.
Yeah, the day after the game, Burns gave an interview to the Records, basically congratulating Rangers winning the league, and really Paul Gascoigne got to hold your hands up, the guy's a genius, he's world class, he's the difference. They had won the cup the year before, they didn't win anything this season, but, and I quote, we won back the support of the fans. So that's what was important, I guess.
He was big on that kind of stuff, Burns. He was emotional. I remember Alan Stubbs, of all people, we was talking about Jansen and the difference between them, and this is a good bit after it. And he said Tommy was a better coach than Jansen. He said Tommy was a better man manager than Jansen. He said, but Tommy cared too much. And he said you couldn't see the wood for the trees, or he couldn't, and it translated to the players. So whenever Rangers dropped points, this idea that came about that Celtic would always blow it, because they kind of always did, Martin, didn't they? I mean, they did.
I was just about to go into that in the build up to this game. We only lost 3 games that season, 2 of which were to Hearts, and this was the third and final defeat of the season. Was a 2-0 defeat at Tynecastle early April, I think.
Yeah, I remember.
And they draw 1-1 at home to Killie. They just can't capitalise whenever we slip up.
That's exactly what Stubbs said. He said whenever that happened, rather than just going, we need to focus on the game, he said he would come in and he'd be, you could see he was barely controlling himself, and he was like, we've got to do it today, we've got to catch Rangers, this is the day we have to do it. And he said, and rather than kind of take the pressure off the players, he multiplied it continually. He said it wasn't his fault, he couldn't help himself. Whereas when Jansen came in, and of course we tried desperately during Jansen's season to try and hand them the league, he was a lot calmer, and they would then pick up the victories when it mattered, because Jansen's Celtic team couldn't beat as much either. It was just that they were better at not dropping the stupid point. And so yeah, Burns saying, oh well, at least we've won the respective fans back, doesn't really surprise me, because I think he was far too caught up in emotional things, and he was far too caught up in the romanticism and the mythology of Celtic, as opposed to just, we need, say what you like about Walter Smith's tactics during that time, or Europe or whatever. Walter was aware that you get judged on the amount of big silver things that you wave at your fans, and that's what he cared about. And that ruthless pragmatism that Walter had, give me that any day over some romantic that would rather have my respect than have my undying admiration.
Yeah, I mean, that means that we're 4 points ahead going into the last 3 weeks of the season. I think everyone was hoping that we'd drop points at Fir Park. We don't. We play very well, actually. We win 3-1, and it means that going into the Aberdeen game with a superior goal difference, mean that realistically we can probably draw the next 2 games at home to Aberdeen and away to Kilmarnock. A busy week in football in the lead up to this game. Graham Souness was in hot water this week, David. Any idea what he could have possibly done?
Was this the flag?
It was indeed. The Wednesday night was the Turkish Cup final. Souness's Galatasaray beat their fierce rivals Fenerbahce, and he famously planted a flag on the centre spot. The Turkish president was pelted with missiles, was trying to present the cup on the pitch. 4 fans taken to hospital. Souness said that he had not intended to cause offence.
Yeah, because I know that if during a big derby match I didn't want to cause offence, what I would do would be go out and plant a fucking enormous flag in the centre circle right in front of them. You have to admire that, because, when we talk about balls, I mean, Souness has a set so large they can be viewed from space, and that was magnificent. I remember it making the national news over here, never just mind the Scottish news. What a magnificent! It's on YouTube. I please go and have a look at it, younger listeners. It's just one of the greatest FUs you will ever see.
Fair to say the Galatasaray fans haven't ever forgotten it. It's very fondly remembered. Some of their tifos demonstrate that. It was an international week, not quite as we know. It was just the one friendly on the Wednesday night, as preparations were obviously getting underway for Euro 96. Scotland got soundly beaten away in Denmark 2-0, and the B team, which was a thing back then, lost 3-0 to Denmark's B team on the Tuesday night. Erik Bo Anderson of this parish scoring the third in that game. Brown pretty much rules out anyone from that squad making the final cut for the summer, because they just haven't impressed. That squad includes Paul Lambert, who would be a European champion a year later. Quite incredible turnaround, and it was certainly something that consistently annoyed me through the 90s under Roxburgh and Brown. These just fucking wet tracksuits in charge of the national team. The squad selection, team selection was sometimes baffling. It was certainly baffling to our left back, David Robertson, who pretty much tells Craig Brown that unless he's guaranteed to start, don't bother including him in any of the squads. And Craig Brown said, don't worry, I won't, because you don't get to kind of demand your place. Kind of understand where Craig Brown's coming from. However, when the options are Tosh McKinlay and Tom Boyd, maybe Davey had a point.
The left-back specialist, Tosh McKinlay, that's a quote from Craig Brown. I think that this is something that's badly in need of a bit of historical re-examining, which is the effect that Craig Brown and Andy Roxburgh had on support for the national team long-term. Because I entered that decade a massively passionate Scotland fan and left it not really bothered, and that's before any of your Rangers versus the rest of Scottish football stuff. That was down to, look, okay, yeah, we were maybe a bit arrogant in Scotland in the 80s. I was growing up, and certainly Argentina 78, of course, being a great example of maybe not counting your chickens before they come home, but at least it was fun and it was exciting and you could dream. They took that away, because after a while, hearing a guy, or two guys in this case, continually come out and telling you, look, we're a bit pish, and the best we can hope to do here is be a bit pish but be slightly less pish than the opposition, time after time after time. And as you say, picking these fucking idiots in clown shoes and guys like Scott Gemmell, no offence, Tosh McKinlay because he'll turn up every game and go and sit on a bench in Moldova, ignoring guys like Richard Gough and David Robertson because they actually have an opinion and a winning mentality. And I remember the Greece game, and Scotland were appalling, lost 1-0 in Greece, and Craig Brown of course famously comes out and said, well, we had more corners than them. And I remember watching that and thinking, and it was just, it wasn't funny anymore. And what was the point of it? And okay, we were qualifying for major tournaments, which was cool, but the problem is, it's a little bit like these managers I'd say in England now, that the Pulises, the guys that you'll put up with while you're winning, and you'll put up with that while you get into international tournaments, but as soon as that stops, then the overwhelming sense of ennui and pointlessness that has overcome the national team overcame us. And I really think that at one point someone has to go back and say, do you know what you did? You removed I spoke earlier about not wanting romanticism in my club football. I think you need to have it at international level, surely. That's the key to the whole, unless you're Germany or Brazil. I think they sucked the joy out of following Scotland, and I don't think it's ever recovered.
Yeah, it'll come as no surprise to anyone that Richard Gough was fully behind David Robertson in his claims. Whilst on England duty, Paul Gascoigne tells the press that a policeman had told him before the Motherwell game at Fir Park that I talked about earlier, that Mike McCurry would book him early. He duly did, and Paul was thinking about going to FIFA to ensure he didn't get a ban for the cup final, as he was only one booking away from missing it. If that was Tom Boyd, I think we'd make a bit of hay with that, David.
Yeah, Mike McCurry, the Reverend Mike McCurry. I don't know quite why it was a shock to Gaza that he got booked early, considering the way he tackled. He was a guy I would have told, if I see you tackling someone, you're getting fined, because he just could not do it, and yet laboured under the misapprehension for his whole career that he could. He was refereed differently to everyone else, there's no doubt about it, joking aside, but I don't think that the referee had pre-planned it in that case, much as I'm not a fan of Scottish referees. I think Gaza could be his own worst enemy when it came to picking up yellow cards. I'll give him this. Quite
literally
often
picking up yellow cards.
Yes, well, yeah, that one I'll grant you. But I'll give Gaza this. Very rarely did he pick up 2 yellows. It was almost like he got one out of his system, and then that was him.
Whilst the Gianluca Vialli to Rangers rumours aren't going away, they're quite solid, I think. Keith Jackson tells us that David Murray will jet out to Amsterdam to have a personal meeting with Edgar Davids, 30 grand a week. Both players would be playing in the Champions League final in a few weeks. The same paper had Barcelona lining up a £20 million bid for Robbie Fowler. That sounds a wee bit ridiculous now, but it wouldn't have been that ridiculous at the time, I don't think.
No, it wouldn't have been. Fowler was amazing for the first sort of 5 years at Liverpool, till injuries really kicked in. But 17 to 22-year-old Robbie Fowler, he could have played and scored for any team in the world at that time, I think. And
couldn't get a game for England though, which shows the kind of strength and depth that they had up front going into that summer.
Well, they did a great partnership, Sheringham and Shearer, and I can understand why you wouldn't necessarily break that up. And Fowler was a little bit like Owen would be. I don't know whether it was something come to at Liverpool. I can't really remember him having many great partnerships, can you? He was a wonderful striker, but he was kind of difficult to play with.
No, I think that's probably fair.
Yeah, I remember him being deadly. There was one game in particular against Manchester United. I think it was Cantona's comeback match.
2 each.
Yeah, and Fowler basically played Manchester United himself. He was outstanding. He did have a good relationship, it was a partnership with McManaman at the time. But Fowler was deadly. Anything from about 20 yards in, he was liable to... He's one of these strikers, Kane's a good modern equivalent, that he could score all types of goals. He got tap-ins, he got near post, he got headers, he got long shots. He had a great range of finishing, and I love a striker like that pretty much any angle he's at, he's going to find a way to work the goalkeeper. That's such a huge quality for a striker. And yeah... I could have seen that happening. Barca had some team back then. This would be the Hristo Stoichkov.
Back to ours though, David. I mean, it's when you're looking back at these and you kind of have to read it again. I mean, this wasn't paper talk. We a genuine interest. Whether that was anywhere near reciprocal is another story. But to even imagine Rangers talking to two players on either end of a Champions League final coming up to come to us the next season. I mean, it's just a different world.
Davids, I don't think we had any chance because he wanted to go to Italy, and as players did back then, and that was a tough one. But Vialli, of course, we were incredibly close to getting, and in the end up, I think it came down to a straight choice for him between us and Chelsea, and he wrote a letter to David Murray and Walter Smith, thanking them for their interest and telling them, he'd been very close, but he wanted to live in London. And he said afterwards that, from a football point of view, although he loved Chelsea and of course he ended up being the manager, he probably should have gone to Rangers, which I think is interesting. Can you imagine how good that would have been? That would have been absolute wank fodder still. What a player he was, and classy guy as well, just a guy I've always liked as a bloke. And
if he had come, it might have changed a conversation we may have later on in this pod. Stuart McKimmie, Aberdeen captain, is furious at Richard Gough in the lead up to this game because Gough had suggested during the week that Aberdeen were the Leeds of Scotland, and that was in reference to the famous Alex Ferguson rant about Leeds cheating their fans by only turning up against United, which then prompted the even more famous Kevin Keegan response, I'll love it if we beat them. Again, I want to time stamp this, Davey, but the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to time stamp by saying Aberdeen try harder against Rangers. Although I suppose the argument could be Aberdeen just can't play anybody from Glasgow particularly.
No.
At the moment. But that's typical Aberdeen. Get annoyed about the comment rather than try improve it wrong by picking up points in the other match. It's very Aberdeen, small club mentality. McKimmie was a good example of that, a guy who could and should have moved 5-6 years before, could have gone on to, he was a very good player. Instead he stagnates at Aberdeen where he's comfortable. And I mean, 1990 he gets that goal against Argentina, world at his feet, could have moved to England, doesn't. He's so Aberdeen it hurts.
No, that's true. So to the game itself then, we don't have any fresh injury worries. Gordon Jury's past fit after a hamstring strain. And Gordon Petric has recovered from a poisoned arm, which is possibly the most Gordon Petric injury known to man.
What the fuck is a poisoned arm?
I need to go back and find out exactly how that occurred, but it's just, you can imagine Gordon coming in saying like, I'm struggling because my arm's fallen off, or it's
I got bit by my rat.
It's in my laboratory.
That's outstanding. A poisoned arm. What a great football injury.
Aberdeen have Duncan Shearer suspended, and Roy Aitken, who was the Aberdeen manager at the time, of course, said in the build-up, there's been nothing much between us this season, and it will be the same on Sunday, which is true if you ignore the 30 points. It's absolutely true. But within that, he did have a kind of fair point. We won 1-0 up there twice, close games, very nervy, but Rangers do the biz. We lost 2-1 at Hampden in the League Cup semi-final, which I remember being really disappointing. I think we actually went ahead from memory that day.
No, we were 2 down. So, Dodds
were 2 down, were we? And Solenko pulled one back.
Solenko pulls one back, and then we didn't turn up for 70 minutes.
It was shite.
Yeah, we were. You're right. It was a really disappointing result because we deserved to go out, and that's piss. At Hampden to Aberdeen, and they are the better side. It was unacceptable rather. I was just say absolutely gutted. Good goal for Solenko, but a wee bit too little too late.
Yeah. And the other game, of course, was a 1-1 draw in the league at Ibrox.
Yes, quite a famous game, or infamous maybe the word. Very tousy football match. These days there'd have been 4 red cards either team and a government inquiry after it. It was a really dank sort of winter day at Ibrox, floodlights on from about 3:10 style game, and they took the lead with an absolute screamer of a goal from Ian Jess. I mean, he's smashed it in from a million miles away. I think he took the lead. It could be the other way around. Rangers get the
no, they did. They took the lead.
Rangers get the equaliser, but that's not why people remember it. People remember it because Gaza at one point. There's no other word to say. He nuts John Ingalls in the chest, and then there are several other incidents with Billy Dodds on the ground a couple of times. He's kicking and punching out at Rangers players, and eventually John Brown brilliantly picks him up by the hair while pressing his knees into his neck. So Bomber's sort of behind him, and Dodds is trying to get up, and Bomber's very kindly helping him up by the hair. However, he's unfortunately put both of his knees on his neck, which is preventing Billy Dodds from getting back to his feet, unfortunately, and what can only be described as a fairly brutal Boston crab. Yeah,
it was ill-tempered, I think it's fair to say, and it spilled over even into this game. But Rangers Aberdeen games, I guess, don't need much to get the temperature rising. The Rangers team, Eddie Bo Anderson plays in front of McCoist. He scored 6 goals in 4 games, so fair enough. We'll come to Ali a wee bit later on. As I said, Gascoigne is one booking away from missing the cup final. Richard Goff and Andy Gorham are the other 2, and Les Mottram is the name, or is the referee. It's just an absolute referee name from my childhood. It's just so synonymous with Scottish football history.
He again, this is on YouTube, and I advise younger listeners to go and check this out. In fact, I advise all people my age as well, because you'll remember this. He did one of the greatest refereeing fuck-ups I have ever seen in my life.
For
Hill, yes. Dundee United versus Partick Thistle, and there's a shot that goes in but goes through the net. It hits the side netting, but then it actually comes through the net, which has clearly not been secured properly, and everyone stops, the fans cheer, and he awards a goal kick, and the whole stadium's going, no, it went in, it went between the big white things and under the white bar, and the Dundee United players sort of catch on and go, or I think it was the United players, could be the other way around, but the defending team catch on and go, hang on a minute, he doesn't think it's a goal. And then they play along with it. But they have already, before that, started walking back to the halfway line, which makes it even more. And I think it's one of these occasions where there's a moment, if you watch the footage, where he knows he's fucked it up, but being a Scottish referee of the 90s, he is not going to change his mind.
Nope.
And an absolute classic. He ended up pissing off to, I think, like China or somewhere. He got offered a load of money to go and referee abroad, and he did so. A sort of proto-Clattenburg.
Always one step ahead in Scotland in terms of dreadful referees. The main eye-opener on our team is Trevor Stephen playing at right wing-back, because as Hoggy and I talked about in episode 4, the Loudrop Cup final episode, we are 3-5-2 at the time, really to accommodate Gascoigne. So it's Gorham and goals, Gough, McLaren and Brown, the three at the back, David Robertson and Trevor Stephen at wing back, Stuart McCall, Gascoigne, I guess Loudrop in midfield with Gordon Dury and Eric Bow Anderson up front, Durant, McCoist and Petrich make the bench. I've asked a few sheepy mates about the likely Aberdeen formation that day. They all say it's a 4-3-3, but I'm not really buying that. I don't believe Aberdeen have ever come down here and played 4-3-3, so I'm going to call it a 5-3-2 to try and combat us. Michael Watt in goals, making a welcome return to a title decider at Ibrox. Smith, Ingalls and Irvine are the back three. Stuart McKimmie and the very highly rated Stephen Glass out on left wing back. Rowson, Paul Bernard and Dean Windass in midfield, with Scott Booth and Billy Dodds roaming up front. And that 1-1 game is clearly in the memories, because Billy Dodds is pretty much booed right from the outset. It's kind of nervy, disjointed start, as you might expect, with so much riding on it. Gascoigne's coming deep to get the ball often, and we see that in the cup final too. Billy Dodds is a decent effort from distance in the 8th minute, and again he's roundly booed. Their wing-back system kind of getting shown up as John Brown releases David Robertson, not for the first time. He hairs away from his marker quite easily, but Brian Irvine, very experienced, calm defender, comes round to sweep it up. Aberdeen kind of settled quite nicely when they have the ball. They're set up well. Frustrating us right from the off. Richard Gough clashes heads with Irvine on 14 minutes, and he gets bandaged up later for any of the footage of him receiving the trophy. That's why. Robertson sent away again, this time by Loudrop. There's a dangerous ball for Dury on 18 minutes, but it's cleared for a corner by Stephen Glass, and from the corner Michael Watt makes a rip-roaring cunt of the cross, as you would come to expect from him at Ibrox. And then there's an Aberdeen goal on 19 minutes. Stephen Glass corner, not cleared by Gough at all. It's just the worst effort at all at trying to clear a cross ball. He then loses his man, Brian Irvine, who has time to compose himself and just kind of forces it past Gorham, and then Trevor Stephen on the line. It is a truly awful goal, David.
And again, this is where memory plays tricks on you. I could have told you Aberdeen took the lead. I could have told you that Brian Irvine scored, but in my head it was a cracker. And just memory playing tricks with you. Having watched it back, it was good lord. And it's interesting because obviously in our minds, quite rightly, Richard Gough is held up as the exemplar of what a centre-half should be, but he's in a nightmare here. And as you say, just a real shit goal to give away. And I think what struck me in the opening 20 minutes was that Aberdeen were playing with a calmness, possibly because they've got nothing to lose, whereas obviously it's a huge game for us. And
absolutely.
I don't think they play like that at Ibrox back then normally. I think they come into it sort of nervy and desperate to get that monkey off the back in terms of the hoodoo, which was by this point a thing. And I was surprised really to see that they're just going, you know what lads, whether we win or we don't, it doesn't really matter, so let's go out and try and play football. And look, they have some limited players on that side. Rowson springs to mind immediately. There's a Scottish at the time Premier League clogger, nothing more, nothing less. But there is talent in that side, but a lot of them were underperforming pussies. Scott Booth, for example, being case in point, or a guy whose career was based on being a talented underperforming pussy. And on a day where then there's hardly any pressure on them, I think they sort of relax a little bit, and we do look nervous, I think. And I remember feeling nervous in the stands that day. And the opening 20 minutes, a couple of nice bits of play from us, because they're not a good side, and if we do good things we will be able to take advantage of that. But we just don't look ourselves that day by this stage. And going a goal down, you hear the almost audible groan, really, from the support who know
absolutely that you're kind of booked in for a party, and
we're going to make it hard for ourselves is basically the mood, not the mood, but the feeling then that we're going to do this in the proper Rangers way of putting 48,000 people through the mill.
But importantly, we respond very quickly. Stuart McCall, I'm going to say, successfully claims a throw-in from a tackle. I'm not entirely sure it was a throw-in, but we take the throw-in and we get a corner directly from it, and then something happens. Laudrup, short ball to Gascoigne on the edge of the box. He glides past Billy Dodds and then Windass before managing to get the ball on his right foot to score past Watt right into the roof of the net. He's still got a lot to do with the shot, even though it's close range. It's just a brilliant goal. It's a perfect example of one individual saying no.
Yes. Two people in Scotland could have scored that goal that decade, and they're both playing for it. They're both involved in this goal, and it's a magnificent finish. I mean, it's a great run anyway, because they're aware he's going to run at them. It's not like they're not set for him. It's not like, oh my God, Paul Gascoigne's just beat a man. They know what's coming, but to then do it and to adjust his body and generate the power that he does with absolutely no backlift at all, and just somehow get the power to put it past Watt, who was a good shot stopper, who was an absolute pussy. Again, I'm using that word a lot, but I can't think of another word to more aptly describe Aberdeen, apart from maybe a wet pussy when it came to crossballs. But he was a good shot stopper, and he's just managed somehow from an impossible physical position to generate the power and get it in. It was some goal, an absolute cracker. And that was the thing about Gascoigne. He could do it, and Laudrup was the same. Big games, when you need them. This is a day we need our special players to do something special, and he has done. And the mood changes at Ibrox. The sort of Paul lifts slightly, and then you go back to, right, okay, they've had their moment, that's now been and gone, and now we will go on and assert our dominance over them because we are the better side. Gaz is clearly, he's up for this today. We didn't know how up for it he would be, but going into half time, or sort of moving into the second half of that half, you're beginning to think, right, okay, Rangers, you've had your scare, you've overcome it quickly, you've removed the tension, let's go and win it.
Yeah. Brian Laudrup tries quite often, he just after that goal and throughout the rest of the game, tries a kind of connection with Eric Bo Anderson more than anyone else that he would do to great effect with Gordon Durie in the cup final a few weeks later. That kind of lobbed passes that he kind of comes into a deeper position. Him and Durie would just obviously run riot in that cup final. Doesn't quite come off today. He tries one with as I said, Eric Bo Anderson, and he didn't quite get the shot away. Alan McLaren has a decent effort from outside the box, which whistles wide. My memory of the season before, didn't he score an absolute brammer of a free kick at Tannadice?
Yes, because it was so...
in the first and second of the game or something.
It was so unexpected, because it was Alan McLaren. And I remember that game, it was a fairly comfortable victory, but Walter had to end up taking Laudrup off, because Rangers were, with half an hour to go, the game was over, and United just started kicking Laudrup constantly, to the point that after the match, when I was listening in the car on the way home from Tannadice, that the Radio Scotland guys were appalled and were genuinely having a go at United and saying, that was unprofessional, they completely lost their discipline, and he wasn't taking the piss out of them or anything. It was just that he's their best player and he's beaten us at football and we're going to start kicking him. But yeah, cracking goal from McLaren. Didn't really get to hit a lot more It was as if that they as if they all thought, including him, that was my one. I'm never going to do that again.
As you said, though, after the goal, we pick up the pace and we're far more fluid, and the performance pretty much immediately improves. Laudrup's now turning up on the right hand side. He just goes wherever he likes, really. A dangerous ball in on the 27th minute, but it's cleared again for a corner. He almost gets in again, but Gary Smith covers and puts out for another corner. From that corner, a 1-2 with McCall. Gascoigne takes it right to the byline and sends in a great cross. And again, your man, Alan McLaren, with a looping header which goes right onto the right-hand post. So we go close there. Richard Gough is inspired by the virtuoso goal, and he just starts charging through the middle of the park for some reason. He puts Laudrup through, but Brian can't get a good enough shot away. And then probably the chance of the first half, and it comes for Aberdeen on 34 minutes. Somehow Scott Booth is through right on goal from a Billy Dodds knock on. Gorham does all they can do, which is just stand up, really. And I think you've kind of touched on it before, that maybe that mental fragility when it matters of that Aberdeen team, and Scott Booth in particular. I mean, the shot is just this powder puff straight at Gorham, but Jesus, that could have been dangerous.
It's just a flick into Gorham's midriff, isn't it? And I remembered that one. That is one of these moments that's absolutely etched on my mind. I mentioned earlier about the first goal not being correctly logged in my brain. This one, for some reason, is because it was right in front of where I sat, and he's clean through. And not only is he clean through, he's clean through with all the time in the world, if I may use that cliche, because he really does. There's
no one near him.
He can shoot early. He's got a lot of the goal to hit while Gorham's coming out. He doesn't. He can go round him. He chooses not to. And at this point, he's running out of options, and instead of then picking, right, I'm going to do this, he just simply gets there and sort of, you can't even call it a toe poke, because a toe poke would have been harder. He sort of just flicks the ball up, and Gorham is there and saves it. We spoke about this in the number one show, which I advise people to check out, about goalkeepers. There's a new one coming this week. That I think one of the innovations that Andy Gorham doesn't get enough credit for was he was the guy that I think taught a generation of goalkeepers, stand up, make them make a decision, don't come hearing out your goal, eyes fixed in the ball, and chuck yourself down, so that the guy can either chip you or go around you and instigate contact, as we call it these days. He just would go and stand in front of them. He always got his angles right, so he was always there at the right time. And he would just go and then beat me. And the amount of times people couldn't, because they would do exactly what Scott Booth did, which is 5 options crash into their brain at once. They take none, and they end up just tamely hitting the ball at Gorham, and he makes the save. But what a chance. I mean, it's a sitter, let's be honest. He's got 4 or 5 ways to score and elects to choose none of them. He doesn't even try any of the ones that could lead to a goal, and then they end up just... But then Scott Booth, for a guy so highly praised, he didn't score a lot of goals, did he?
No. And again, he's one staking his claim for inclusion in the Euro 96 squad. He flattered to deceive. And there's a perfect example of why. I think his mind just got scrambled when push came to shove. And it's just the most anemic effort you could imagine.
We talk a lot about natural finishers, Martin, and I think there's an example about someone who it's not their first instinct is to do the right thing in the way that a guy who'll get you 25, 30 a year will do. And yeah, just terrible miss, and it completely deflates Aberdeen from an attacking sense. And don't get me wrong, they still scrap very hard, but it's almost like their fans go, that was it. That was the chance.
That was the chance, yeah. We've got a wee collector's item on 38 minutes as David Robertson has an overhead kick in the middle of the box, but it just goes over. You don't see Tosh McKinley doing that. Yeah. But Aberdeen defensive shape is reasonably sound. They've got a lot of guys behind the ball. It's becoming a bit of a problem. Gascoigne can't pass through as much as he clearly wants to do, clearly tries to do. And at half time, I think frustration's just the word.
Yeah, it was. I remember going in the concourse and frustration is the word. People kind of going, fuck's sake, Rangers today. A phrase that's always stuck with me for some reason, just because it was such an unusual phrase to hear a Scottish person saying, was this guy was walking by me and he went, 3 points today is a must. And I thought, I bet he's never used, that phrase ever before, but it stuck with me to this. Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of thing you would never say at any other. But you would never sit having ran out of milk to turn to the wife and go, milk being purchased is a must. It's not a phrase you use. But at the football, we all use lines that I don't think we would normally use. Yeah, I remember.
I'd like to think that guy, whenever he heard of Gascoigne signing or something like that, he phoned his pal and said, Rangers have swooped. 0.3 million rated midfielder.
Yeah, we've made a shock.
I would love if he just talked in those kind of tabloid cliches all the time.
It would be great, or he could say things along the lines of, Walter's admitted that he's interested in Edgar Davids. These stock
you forced it out of him.
Exactly, these stock phrases. But yeah, 3 points is a must, and it's stuck with me to this day that I've actually ironically used it so often that I think I use it now unironically. Yeah. It's a bit like if you ever online, if I ever call you dude, I'm not being ironic anymore. We used to do it ironically, me and my mates, and then the time I realised when that it had gone into past the stage of irony was a friend of mine, his mother died. And he came, he saw me, he's like, oh, my mum passed away this morning. I was like, dude. And he went, I know, dude, I can't believe it. And I'm like, fucking hell, dude. And this is about his mum dying, Dude is an inappropriate word for such a conversation. So, yeah, if I ever call you dude online, please don't think I'm taking the piss out of you. But there's a frustration because I think you nailed it earlier, Martin. No matter what anybody says, right, we have turned up for the party. Okay, and it's all right saying, it'll be a tough game and we've got to get the victory and yada yada yada. We're there for the 4:45 moment, and hurry up and fucking get us to that, Rangers, would you? And that was the kind of levels of expectation about Rangers back then. It wasn't.
Don't want to be going to Rugby Park look for a point.
No, God no.
Either. It's something we just hadn't been used to doing for so long.
No, we want it done. We're at home, we're all here, we're all ready, we've all got plans, after the game. Carryouts have been bought, days off have been arranged from work the next day, and I remember it being really sunny. I think something we should maybe touch on is you and I watching the game were both a little bit surprised that it was a lot more turgid an actual football match than maybe we remembered.
Shit. It's mainly because we know why we remember it. We know what images are kind of imprinted on the mind, and they're as opposite from turgid as it's possible to get. But Aberdeen, they played to their game plan. They were very difficult to break down, and on the break, Booth is not the most prolific, but Dodds was, and he's fast, and Windass breaking from midfield as well could be a problem also. So the second half starts, no changes. There's a long ball put into the Aberdeen box, and even with two defenders around them, in fact, sorry, not into the box, it's 10 yards outside the box, and there's two defenders near it. Michael Watts still comes out, charging out of his box to try and clear, and he makes, as you would expect, an absolute arse of it, and he just gets spooked by these end of season games at Ibrox for some reason. Eddie Bow he's sent through again, but he struggles to get free enough to get a shot on goal. The pressure's building, and Big Goff has a header that goes wide from a corner. Jury's got a good chance, but he just gets the header wrong. Still some way out, and it's these two 3-5-2s, game just getting very bogged down. Trevor Steven is starting to get kind of caught out, and Trevor Steven coming to really the end of his career, not just at Ibrox, just in general, and he's starting to get caught out a wee bit. There's plenty of space in behind him, and Stephen Glass is now exploiting that quite a lot when Aberdeen do go forward. He cuts one back for Windass, and his shot's blocked by McLaren in 54 minutes. Again, Eric Bo Anderson is put through, but he just doesn't have the strength really to wriggle free and get enough space to get the shot in. It's pretty weak. Again, Michael Watts at sea. Jury gets past him, gets to the byline. He cuts it back. I think it's for Laudrup, but Eric Bo Anderson takes it. Oh, it's for Gascoigne, I think, and then Eric Bo Anderson actually takes it in front of him. But again, his touch is poor, and the ball goes out. Play's starting to get a wee bit more stretch. Players are turning up in all sorts of positions. I mentioned David Robertson turning up in the box for an overhead kick. And I think Bo Anderson has his final chance of the day on 58 minutes. A nice 1-2 with Jury, but he just absolutely skies it. I mean, he's been really, really poor. Billy Dodds is an effort from about 23 yards on the hour mark, but Gorham saves quite comfortably down to his right. Laudrup and Jury linking up nicely, but it comes to nothing. But it would be a portent of things to come in a few weeks, of course. Eric Bo Anderson leaves the field for Ali McCoist on 61 minutes, but again, it's Aberdeen that's still looking a wee bit more dangerous. Stephen Glass is really giving Trevor Stephen a struggle, and it's just a generally a frustrating day. Laudrup has a cross in on 67 minutes that McCoist goes close with a low header, but not close enough to really get us too excited. Laudrup, of all people, makes the wrong decision. A minute later, a great sweeping move for once. Gascoigne plays him in. He should have shot, but he decides to be cute and kind of chip it back across the box, and it just gets smothered. Windass has a chance, again coming from Glass, really giving Stephen a roasting. It's a good header, and Gorham just tips it over. Laudrup plays for a penalty when we break right away, and it's not given probably correctly. Gaz is now starting to twist and turn. He's starting to almost like a boxer, kind of just warming up for the haymaker that's about to come. But he's not quite getting enough room to make that ultimate contribution yet. 73 minutes, a Gascoigne corner is tipped onto the bar by Michael Watt, again a header from Alan McClam, but everything's just coming from Paul Gascoigne. Trevor Stephen is finally relieved, and Gordon Petric, free of arm poison, is unleashed onto the park. And again, Gascoigne's twisting away from players. He releases Jury this time, but nothing really happens. Petric puts Michael Watt under pressure from a corner, and again McClam goes wide. It's starting to come, you maybe feel it, but there's just so many bodies in the Aberdeen half of the field. And then Aberdeen have a throw in on 80 minutes. It goes to Billy Dodds, he loses control, Alan McClam wins it, and he gives it to Gascoigne, the Rangers half, and shouts at him, I believe, you need to do something.
Yeah, you need to do, come on, you're a special player, you need to do something for us, according to both of them afterwards.
Yeah.
That he gives him the ball and says, come on, you're the special player, you need to do something. No pressure, Paul.
No pressure. Well, he beats Windass for the ball and then glides past Paul Bernard, who chases him all the way from the halfway line into the box, and then he's joined by Stuart McKimmie, who can't get him. Laudrup's cleverly taking Ingalls away with him to the left, and for once the other two defenders, who have been Gary Smith and Brian Irvine, don't really go out to meet him. They give him that room that's pretty much been missing for the whole game, and that's all he needs. Roof of the net, title's won, and Charlie Nicholas sounds deflated when he says what a goal, as if you're like, oh fuck, what a goal, fair enough. Jeremy he says he'd gone a bit quiet. I'm not sure what game McNee was watching, but again, when we come to that later. Relief, David?
Oh god, yeah, but also that feeling of I have just witnessed something very special. And again, goals, their if you like, their extraordinariness I can't think of another word for it, is amplified by the game that they are scored in. So,
you know it's iconic.
Yeah, if he scores that goal in a 5-0 win over Falkirk, we'll fondly remember it. Of course we will. But it's not, going to become the legendary goal that it is, that every Rangers fan can play in their mind, when we're sitting back at night and just remember it and remember the feelings. And of course Ibrox erupts into that full-throated roar that's been sitting in the stomach for since before the match, really. And the players mob him. He, by his own admission, is knackered after that long bursting run, and it was that feeling of, oh my god, And again, can I just use another cliche of things that you only would say at a stadium, in this case because it's so fucking stupid, but it makes perfect sense at a football match. You're turning round to, in my case, my dad, my friends, they're turning to me, and all of us are saying the same thing. Did you see that?
Yeah.
You know. No, sorry lads, I'd brought a paper, and I had just got to Angus Og in the Sunday Mail. I never like to miss it, so I was just reading that. No, of course, but you do, don't you? Fuck, did you see that? And it was just as if you're seeking confirmation from people that the extraordinary event you've just witnessed actually did take place. But there's 48,000 rollers going on to tell you that it did. It was a sublime goal. I said earlier there's a goal that only 2 people in Scotland in the 90s could have scored. Well, you can chalk up another one here. Maybe even only one, just due to the type of goal that it was. It's a world-class goal. It's a title-winning goal. It deserves to be. It's an extraordinary bit of play from a guy who could do that. And yeah, you're absolutely correct. It was just wonderful, just a perfect moment that will live forever.
It is a Gascoigne goal, though, because it isn't just skill. It is strength. He uses. I mean, he was often criticised early in his career for the way he used his elbows, really just to stop people hacking him to bits. But it was very much one of those Gascoigne goals. If you saw him in Italia 90, you wouldn't be surprised at him scoring a goal like that, because there's a lot of bustle about it. Whereas Laudrup scored goals similar to that. One, I'm sure, at home to Tyler Motherwell, Dundee United the season before. But Laudrup is effortless. Laudrup glides past players. It looks like he's got a shield around him. Gascoigne clearly is fighting those guys off, but it doesn't take any of the shine off the goal. I mean, it is just pure individualism. It's someone grabbing a game and saying, no, this is going to happen now.
If I can make a modern comparison between the two players, the two similar styles, and I'm not comparing levels of players, well, in one of their cases anyway. If you ever watch Barcelona, Martin, and you'll see Messi and Suarez, Messi glides past players. Yeah. Suarez, it's that chaos thing that Gaza did, which is he hits the ball quite often into a guy and then, gets the rebound and uses his strength to get past and just almost forces his way through, whereas Messi just glides past people as if they're not there, as you say, as if he's got this shield around them that they can't penetrate. Gaza was a bit more like the Suarez chaos theory of get the ball running, get almost this Tasmanian devil, arms flailing and chaos happening all around you thing, and take advantage of that, be the coolest man in the eye of the hurricane, if you like. And that was a great example of that, where it's a goal that at any given point it just would take one element of it to go wrong for it not to happen, but somehow he manages to keep them all together and keep himself together and score it, and it's fabulous piece.
It's a very good comparison. I mean, Laudrup and Messi look like they've graduated to the Royal Ballet, and Gascoigne and Suarez look like they've never left the streets. But it's equally as beautiful, it's equally as effective.
Yeah.
So maybe in party mode now, McCoist trying to get involved. I think he shoots from about 35 yards, but it's not his best effort. Again, Alan McLaren finds himself in the box after another Laudrup 1-2 that he's really warming up for the cup final. He blasts wide, sadly. That game really needed an Alan McLaren goal. Aberdeen a wee bit all over the shop now. They do get a corner though. Gorham punches it away, and we break. We break pretty fast, and Gordon Jury is brought down by Paul Bernard for a penalty on the 86th minute. Gascoigne has to plead with McCoist for the ball, and he gets it because him and Jury have a bet going on about who's going to be the top goal scorer for £50, and Gascoigne wants that money. He wouldn't get it thanks to Jury's cup final hat-trick, but that's an earlier pod if you want to go back and listen to that. He gets the ball, he scores very easily. I mean, Watt doesn't really move, and Gascoigne takes his very well-deserved ovation. And it's clear now that everyone has relaxed. It's all ole ole, one Paul Gascoigne ringing around the stadium. Ian Durrant comes on for sentimental appearance maybe for Gordon Durie, and McNee brings up the history of Aberdeen and Durant, and it's always an emotional game for him. Good old Les Mottram only plays 45 seconds of injury time, no point. We are champions for the 8th time in succession, the 9th time in 10 years, and the 46th overall. Walter Smith equals Bill Struth's record of 5 individual championships in a row. But it's all really about one man here. He's carried shoulder high with the ball in his hands, and he's last to leave the field before they get ready for the presentation. I'm not a huge fan of coming out to get trophies and t-shirts, David, nor entirely with the kids. Was this the first time that we had the t-shirts on, or did that happen a couple of times before?
No, the t-shirts go back to the first I remember is 86, 87 with
of course
Mick Roberts, Mick Butcher, Mick Woods, the English connection. No, I'm the same, especially not sponsor-led t-shirts, which this clearly is. McEwen's Lager to the fore. Yeah, come out in your strip. Kids, I fucking hate. I loathe that. Any club in the world, get your wains to fuck. This is not a moment for your kids. This is a moment between you and us. We together have achieved this. You on the park, us in the stands, right? It's our moment, and we don't want to see your fucking children, and we don't want to see your wives. Go and celebrate with your family afterwards, that's fine, but this moment is between us and you. And I've had people say to me, and I'm sure they'll be in the comment section, "Oh, David, how can you say that? That's horrible, you know, the wee Wayne, what a moment it is for them." Fuck them, I've earned this. I've been through every fucking moment of this bastarding season. It's mine, it's the guy next to me. If it is those Waynes, then it's from the fucking comfort of the free ticket section. And I will, to my dying day, I will stand behind the fact that it's not for kids. Sorry, I would ban it. And I'd like to see, when we win 55, someone's appointed to say, no, the kids will need to wait up, so you need to be a minimum height to get on here. It'll be like a ride at Disneyland. No. Just, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm behind that.
Good.
Just for the record, though, if we do win 55 soon, Mrs. Johansson, you are
she's
absolutely welcomed on the park at any time.
Well, she's played a vital role in it, so yes.
Let's talk about Jerry McNee, Davey. He had a News of the World column at the time, and things got quite personal with him and Gascoigne during that season. He refused to actually call him by his name and just called him number 8. He called him a thug. And as a result, Gascoigne, I think, almost refused to speak to the media for a while. He certainly refused to speak to Radio Clyde in the build-up to the Scottish Cup semi-final. I remember that, because of McNee. But in his commentator role, he is chuckling away here. He seems genuinely appreciative of this incredible talent. What is this split personality all about?
Jerry McNee, and we can debate whether or not this is to his credit, and I suspect strongly that it is, in terms of his professionalism, whereas we will then talk on one half of his two roles, but we'll then talk about what it says about the other. Always managed to maintain the difference between Jerry McNee, the caricature journalist, and Jerry McNee, the football commentator. And I will say that for him, that Jerry McNee, generally speaking, and watch this game back and watch others from the 90s, folks, Jerry McNee calls the game pretty much down the middle and pretty much opinionless. As you say, maybe a harmless opinion, like, oh, he's not been in it as much today. Not anything, you know, there's no, oh, he's terrible, oh, that's what you'd expect. None of that shit. He just commentates on the football match. And as you say, that day, a guy that he's had this long-running battle with in the press, he's being generous and fair and open-minded and correct in his description of him. And I do think that McNee adopted a completely different mindset when he got behind a microphone to commentate on a football match. I think he just saw himself as, I am here to commentate on this game, I am not here to give my opinion, which is of course what you would want a commentator to do. Now, that then makes you think, well, how genuine was the stuff that he wrote? was that genuinely how he felt, or did he just have this amazing ability to put a mask on and not let it influence him? And if so, then that, as I say, is to his credit as a commentator. However, I'm not letting him off that easy, because the stuff with Gascoigne was vile, and I maintain this. To not refer to a guy by his name is an attempt to dehumanise him, and that's exactly what it was. It's an attempt to portray him as a caricature and portray him as somehow not even being worth the respect of having his name called to him. And Paul Gascoigne had never done anything to Jerry McNee for that to be the case. You know, you cannot like a guy as a footballer. We see it all the time. We all have players that we just instinctively dislike as football players. We've no right to take that out with the football arena unless they have done something out with the football arena that indicates it. And McNee did that, and he personalised it, and then he wondered why Gascoigne was upset with it. But then the Scottish media at that time, and again, because the Scottish media doesn't do looking back on itself in any way, their treatment of Gaza was appalling. I remember that Bill Leckie, in his column in the Daily Record at the time, yes, although he would never admit to it now, Bill Leckie was in the Daily Record and used to write scathing things about the Sun. Bill Leckie in his column would write in a sort of comedy viz Geordie accent and poke fun at Gaza's battle with alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Now, that's scummy behaviour. That's just... You just don't do that. There's no need to do that. You wouldn't do it for anybody else. Why are you doing it with him? Because you could. Because he's a Rangers player and therefore he's fair game. Because he's Gaza. He's just this caricature. He's not a human being. I don't need to treat him with the respect I would treat a human being. And it was vile. And McNee was the leader for it. And James Traynor was as bad. James Traynor tried for ages to get the nickname the Man-Child going.
Yeah.
It wouldn't take off because McNee had beaten him to it with number 8. But that was the level of coverage that the guy received. But, yes, to the original question, his commentary was fair. And you couldn't even tell, actually, that he was a Tim, because he was, as you say, laughing and chuckling away and saying how well he'd played and what a great season
he was just genuinely appreciative of, I think, the football that was being displayed. It's almost as if columnists of any kind, especially football ones, treat it like a pantomime.
Yeah. Well, people who have controversial opinions for money to deadlines.
Yeah, and it's probably fair to say that Gascoigne didn't make that distinction. Because the following season he, at Easter Road in a warm-up, launched a pinpoint accurate ball into the commentary box where McNee was. McNee complained to Alistair Hood and treated it as assault, and if I had my pen in my hand at the time, it could have blinded me. But again, that's a story for another day. Ali, coming to many people thought, we all thought, possibly coming to the end of his Rangers career right there and then. Walter was asked on the pitch, what's the situation here? He seemed quite relaxed about it. He said, I'm sure we'll come to some sort of arrangement. I want Ali here next season. He would, in fact, sign a new contract just around the time of the cup final. But he looks very emotional here, as if this is my final title. He looks miserable. On a title party day, lap of honour, he looks absolutely miserable. And he's got a Sunderland shirt on his back for some reason. How serious was this, David? Was there really any chance that he would leave and miss out on the night? Yeah.
In fact, if you'd asked me to put money on it that day, I would have said that he would be leaving. The following week we played Kilmarnock, and I was at that game. We won 3-0 and Ali scored twice. And the away fans that day always sang to, I'm going to say to the tune of Oasis's Hello rather than the original. Tune. We sang, hello, Ali must stay, and there was a genuine feeling of, can't get rid of Ali McCoist, even if he just stays as a sort of, gonk, like a ceremonial mascot. It's Ali, for fuck's sake. And that day again, that barely celebrated his goals, and yeah, it looked for all the world like he was going, and I would have been heartbroken. I was heartbroken at the prospect of it, and if you'd asked me that day, David, here's 20 quid, go and put it on McCoist leaving or staying, it would have been going on him leaving, because it looked as though he was heading out the door. And if you wanted to, do the body language thing, then you're right. Just watch him in the celebrations.
He looks like it's his final time. He would, of course, stay for another couple of years, and it wasn't just a ceremonial contribution he made. It was a significant one. If Gianluca Vialli had come,
absolutely,
I'm not entirely sure that he would have stayed.
If Rangers get the slightly younger veteran, for want of a better term, then he probably would have been on his bike, and we'd have missed out on, I think, one of Ali's most underrated, greatest runs was the tail end of the 10 in a row season, when by sheer force of personality, determination and love of the club, he dragged Rangers towards what should have been that title. And again, I think we win the Scottish Cup if Walter starts with him that day, but that's for another day.
Indeed. Gascoigne said after the game that the lads were pleased to be pushed by Celtic. I think there's something in that. I think this game is just a perfect crystallisation of the season as a whole. We're put under pressure, and then through individual brilliance, the likes of which no other club in the league has, we just wrestle the situation away with sheer will. Is that fair?
Anyone who says that it wasn't more satisfying and more exciting than when we'd had the league won by March and the games didn't really matter, and back in you'll remember this, Martin, that the games when they were played at the same time and a cheer would go up because Celtic had, we didn't have that for a few years because somebody had scored against Celtic, so it didn't matter. And to then be pushed and it be a challenge and overcome it, of course it's more satisfying. Now, there are times throughout the season you don't want that to be the case, absolutely, but when you get there at the end, of course it means more, because it was worth more, because it was more difficult to get. Rangers had to play to the end of the season and had to maintain a good standard, and really the only side that season that was a thorn in our side was Hearts. As you say, the 3-0 and the 2-0, Gough in particular having a nightmare in the 2-0 at Tynecastle. Hearts were really the only side that for some reason thought they had the measure of us, but we would put that right in a couple of weeks. But Rangers had to be better. They'd had to be worthy champions, as opposed to they could go at 70% for most of the season and then down tools in March, which of course had cost us a cup final before, where we'd done exactly that, and then not been able to recover for the final game. So I would agree with that. I think that the re-emergence of Celtic as a genuine title contender was good for that Rangers team, and not only in terms of results. Look at the football we played, and look at the football we had to play, and the amount of memorable games. I just ask any bear of our age or above, go back and look at the amount of games you remember from 5-6 in a row, and then the amount of games you remember from 8-9 in a row.
Well, this is exactly it. It leads me on to what I was going to ask next. That this season's a departure, really. The two before were kind of relatively disappointing. We win the league, of course. That's never a bad thing. But the low average point totals. The season before were knocked out of every cup competition very early. We were dependent very heavily on Mark Hateley and then Brian Laudrup. But now we win the double. We play far better football. We have a more balanced shape. We record our highest points average for donkey's years. That's adjusting everything before then for 3 points for a win, etc. So the question I want to ask you, I want to ask the listeners, is what is the biggest factor here? The arrival of Paul Gascoigne to share that creative burden with Brian Laudrup, or the fact that we actually have a title challenge and it's from Celtic, not Hearts or Aberdeen?
I don't think you can underplay the Gascoigne effect, because of course having a player who can do what he does is going to have an impact on how good you are to watch. I can't see how any team getting a Paul Gascoigne who hits form is not going to be easier on the eye. It just isn't possible. But if Paul Gascoigne doesn't have to hit those heights, does he? Are the demands placed on him by Walter, for example, and Alan McLaren in the game, for example, are they quite as much? Is Laudrup being asked to play at that level every week? Are the strikers being, asked to play? Are the defence being asked to play at that level every week? And the answer, of course, is no. You'll do what you need to do. If Gascoigne had arrived, Rangers would have played better football, probably, till about March, won the league, and then dossed about, as that Rangers team did, because they would have been on the bevy from March until they had to come back for training for the next season. So I think that while the Gascoigne factor has to be a huge consideration, picking one, then yeah, it's having a genuine title challenge from Celtic that goes to, if not the last day, then very close to it.
Yeah, and again, immediately after winning the title, the talk on trackside, in the commentary box, in the papers the next day, is about the next season. And Hoggy and I touched on this when we did the Laudrup Cup final in episode 5. The questions asked by Hazel Irvine on the pitch 5 minutes after winning the Cup were about, well, the pressure's on for next season. And the shadow of 9 was probably on everything we did since the end of 92-93. After then, it was really in people's minds that we could do this. Can you try and explain this kind of pressure to younger listeners who won't be able to appreciate winning a title, and then everyone saying, aye, well, it's not really worth much if we don't win the title next year?
Well, remember the Gaza song at the start of the 8 in a row season? What was it? It was Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Gaza's here for 10 in a row. So we haven't won 8 yet.
Yeah.
So the pressure to match Celtic was huge. I actually think too much, because I think that once they got 9, they'd almost mentally, they mentally thought that was the achievement rather than just another staging post to where we were going. And I think they relaxed slightly, and it cost us. In fact, I think they relax usually, and it cost us. But yeah, it was great to win the title, but for us it wasn't about winning the title anymore. It was about winning 10, and of course we didn't do that. We did get the 9, and for the older Bears to get 9 was enormous, because I hadn't lived through 9, Celtic's 9. So for me, it's just something in the history books, and it grates a bit, but it doesn't grate. It's like when Celtic fans try to talk me about the European Cup, and I'm like, you didn't see it, I didn't see it, fuck off, doesn't count. And it wasn't as big a thing for me, but for older Bears, they were desperate, they wanted that. And you're right, 7 in a row was a staging post to 10, 8 in a row was a staging post to 10, 9 became, because the pressure of it was so intense, and it was all anyone focused on. I think the estate of John Lennon must have made a fucking fortune off royalties from the song Number 9 Dream, which seemed to be obligatory to be played every time a Rangers player appeared on the telly. And it just overwhelmed everything, and I think the fallout from it, it cost Burnsy's job, obviously. The Rangers team, I think, didn't quite recover from that titanic title battle. But yes, for younger Bears, we've won the league, and it's not let's go party about winning the league, it's let's go party about getting closer to winning 10, which would of course be minimum 2 years hence. But right, 7 in a row has been clinched. We signed this world class, internationally renowned footballer, Paul Gascoigne, and the song that we're singing is about him winning the league in 3 years' time. And it wasn't like current Celtic fans talking about 10 in a row, because it doesn't count, and they know it, and we know it. Everybody knows it. This one counted. This one mattered, and it was huge. And in the end, it was probably destructive for us, I'd say, Martin.
Yeah, and that might be a conversation and a question for another pod. One of the favourite things about the coverage of that day, and I know you're a huge fan of ABBA, Davey, was the winner takes it all outro, which was very enjoyable at the time, and still enjoyable more than 20 years later. Thanks very much again for joining me on a trip through the archives. It's greatly appreciated.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was good to go back and watch that game, a game that I hadn't given enough love to over the years. I'm like you, the goals, but not the actual match, so it was great to go back and see it again.
And thank you, listeners, for downloading and joining in. The feedback is always welcomed, especially to my friend Stevie, who phoned me last night to say he finally subscribed. I thought you'd be shite, mate, but you're actually very good. So that kind of feedback is always welcome by anyone.
Well, I've got some feedback for you. My wife said, when I was editing the one we did last week, my wife came into the room, and she doesn't really listen to the shows because she's not a football fan, and as she says, she gets to hear me talking pish with my mates about Rangers for 20 years, so she doesn't really need to get any more of it, although I have made her subscribe. But she came in and she went, "Oh, who's that?" And I said, "Oh, Martin, you don't know me, I haven't met him." And she said, "Oh, he's got a lovely voice." I said, "Oh, I'll pass that on to him." She said, "He sounds like Bryce Cundy, the continuity announcer for STV in the 70s. And do you know what's most famous about Bryce Cundy, Martin?
Nope.
Bryce Cundy was famously treated at Paisley RAH Hospital, whatever it was called back then, for going in with a light bulb stuck up his arse.
Well, one week it's Sir David Frost, the next week it's a deviant.
He might have fell on it. We've only got one side of the story.
Anyway, next week I hope to have a debut guest with me, as we'll go back to probably the last time that we walked out of Ibrox on a Champions League night, truly believing that we could be one of the big dogs. I'll leave the final words with our Player of the Year and our greatest number 8. I've had 14 operations and I deserve it more than anyone. I've not backed the critics. I knew how good I was. So did we, Paul. So did we. I've been Martin Ramsey. Until next week, bye for now.